Devil. Naruto finally started to peel his eyes open when he felt something warm touch his head. He looked up and noticed Rias was petting him gently, her fingers slowly getting tangled in his hair and running them back before starting over again. He felt like he should have jumped out of bed in surprise, but had gotten so used to her sneaking in at night that he just expected it. Plus he couldn't be bothered to untangle from her in her soft embrace. Morning. Morning. Rias whispered, a yawn slipping out as her drowsiness still seemed to be affecting her. The redhead smiled warmly and continued to run her hand through his hair. I didn't mean to wake you. It's fine, no harm done. Have you been up long? Only a few seconds. Do you want to stay in here for a little bit longer? No, I think I should be getting up. There are things to do. Then I might as well too. No, don't get up for me. Rias tried to stop but couldn't hide the little bit of joy she had that he wanted to wake up with her. Stop it. He groaned and motioned to sway her hand away from his head but did so with little real intention to make her stop. I'm trying to wake up. He sat up in bed, entangling from Rias, arms and yawning before rubbing his eyes. Should we go get some coffee? I'm not really in the mood for some of that awful blend Taichi-san leaves out. Although I suppose the bitter and hard taste might wake me up. Rias didn't sound enthused with the idea but sat up as well and stretched out her arms in her PJs. Let's head downstairs. Naruto and Rias threw off the large cover of the massive bed they slept in and headed for their door. When they opened it they headed down the long hallway, brightened up by ambient lighting and the soft touch of carpet underneath their toes. The two devils tried to clear their eyes of sand as they passed the masterfully done works of modern art that lined the walls. They reached the end of the corridor and called the elevator.
So what was that paperwork you were working on so late last night?
Damages reports Sona gave me. Apparently while Azazel and his group were able to wipe most of the civilians' minds of the explosion from yours and Issei's fight with Valley, there were damages still done to the area. Quake stress. Destroyed property. Not to mention the damage to the forest.
I'm really sorry about that. The blonde apologized as the bell dinged and the elevator arrived. The two stepped on and headed down to the lobby. Didn't think you'd have to pay for our fight. Oh, it's fine. She laughed at his concern for such a little problem and crossed her arms beneath her chest while the soft elevator music hummed. It's a small price to pay knowing you and Issei and everyone else are fine. That's all that matters. When they had all come back from the battlefield to meet up with the rest of the club, it had been to looks of shock and horror about the fight they had been in.
Akino was quick to show her displeasure about not being made privy to the battle between the heavenly dragons and Rias had actually squirmed under her queen's glare. Zenobia had a completely different reaction, showing avid interest in hearing how Naruto and Issei had teamed up together to fend off the Hakuryuko to the best of their abilities. The others showed reactions of concern and relief at their relative lack of injury despite the harsh battle.
Of course that relief died an ugly death when they were informed that the White Dragon Emperor had painted a target on their back now.
The elevator came to a stop and the doors opened as the couple made their way out. They yawned and stretched out their arms while walking through the massive lobby with a high ceiling and a giant chandelier hanging in the middle. The two made their way across the floor and slipped into the kitchenette.
Rias made her way to the coffee machine as Naruto opened the fridge and spotted a shiny red apple. He licked his lips and plucked the fruit before biting into the juicy treat. He walked over and leaned against the counter beside Rias as she sipped on her cup and let out a sigh of pleasure at the taste. Nice apples. And the coffee is exquisite. Definitely a good blend. So am I crazy or? No, I see it too. Rias nodded. I thought the walk to the elevator was more padded and longer than usual. Also the fact that there was suddenly an elevator should have been telling.
Oh, there they are. Glad to see you two separated long enough from exploring your bodies however you do so early in the morning to come down here. Azazel walked into the kitchen, tying a silk robe around his body with a swagger in his step as he pulled a carton of orange juice out of the fridge and started chugging it whole.
Rias' eye twitched. Azazel, he held up a finger while downing the rest of the drink before burping loudly when he finished. Whoa, that's tasty. Anyway, you were saying? What did you do? About what? All of this. Rias motioned to the kitchen and out the door to the sudden lobby and extravagant building they found themselves in. The complex was not like this when we went to bed last night. Speaking of which, 1 a.m.? Seriously? Did you two even fool around or anything? Azazel looked between the fuming couple with disappointment. For shame. You give all hormone-addled teens a bad name when you don't succumb to your lust immediately.
Don't change the subject. The pajama-clad devil marched up to the robed fallen angel and wagged her finger in his face. What did you do? This was a cramped, two-story building just a few hours ago. Now it's this. This lavish, big, how? Well, since this town is going to be the neutral territory for the factions in our treaty from now on, it felt appropriate we all work together to create something. So I suggested a building that can be used as a resting point for any dignitaries making their way through here. Just a little place, no biggie.
Kinda big actually, Naruto yelled, coming back from running outside with a surprised expression. This place is massive. It's a skyscraper, there's like 24 stories. And a few levels underground too. It's really not that big a deal. But the rest of the area is totally unchanged. Everyone is looking at this place in shock because there are a bunch of crummy shops and buildings around here and one fucking skyscraper smack dab in the middle. Azazel blinked and shrugged. Gentrification? Azazel, Rias sighed tiredly, fed up with the fallen angel's flippant attitude and just glaring up at him suspiciously. You did this all in one night? With some help from devils, angels, and fallen angels of course. Your brother actually financed most of it. And did Taichi-san just hand you the ownership of the property?
He did, and I handed him back a ludicrous amount of money for him to do whatever his greasy little heart desires. Plus I gave Marco a lifetime pass on cruises and bars around the world, so he's basically in heaven trying to negotiate his way into some young lady's heaven, if you catch my drift.
Naruto and I went to bed in our normal room. We woke up in a much bigger room and a much bigger bed. Ria's eyes narrowed. Were there people moving us while we were sleeping? I feel like I shouldn't answer for my own prosperity, but it should be painfully clear that you already know the answer. Her destruction coruscating over her palm with a level glare did the trick in getting the fallen angel to shut up.
Okay, let's not get antsy. Azazel said jovially while slowly lowering Ria's hand by the wrist and avoiding the light that would hurt him. First off, let me just say I love that intensity in your eyes. Cold. Unyielding. Probably already made your decision about what to do with me and are now just figuring out the minute details. Have to respect that in a fellow leader.
And I can tell you now it's not pretty. Second, we should be getting ready for bigger things. It's summer vacation now, and you know what that means. Ria's eyes remained lidded for a few moments before she lowered her hand and dispelled her destruction with a disgruntled sigh. You're right. Better use of energy getting prepared. Prepared for what? Sorry, I haven't told you. Rias apologized. After what happened with Valley, I thought it would be best if we took some time to train and reevaluate things going forward.
The Chaos Brigade is going to be a serious threat not only to the factions and the treaty, but possibly for other mythologies. The Old Devil faction, Valley and whatever followers he may have picked up. And perhaps other individuals of strength similar to theirs joining their side. As such, we have a meeting between potential leaders of the devils, fallen angels, and other mythologies to discuss these matters. I thought in the time leading up to that it would be good for us to train.
Naruto's expression fell. Please tell me they aren't all coming here. Of course not. Then where are we going, devil?
Naruto hummed while looking around and taking in the lavish state of the cabin. Can I assume this is what it means to travel in style?
I guess you aren't accustomed to it then? Rias remarked with a coy smile. Well, there are some perks to taking an empty train and being in the first-class transport.
The upholstered leather couches and seats that sucked them in when they sat down. The fully stocked bar and assortment of snacks and food for them to enjoy. The entertainment system secured off to the side that Kaneko and Gasper were currently playing while Issei and Yuto waited for their turn. It was luxury seating for the group of young VIPs on their way back home. I never thought I would be going to the underworld of my own volition. I was sure the day I came here would either be for a Black Ops mission where I would infiltrate hell and kill its leaders, or if I was captured and being taken down here to be tortured for what I know. Zenobia casually mentioned that statement which hung in the air and garnered her some odd looks. Coming here for a vacation is very different from what I expected. So what can you tell me of hell? Well, I've only been there once, and it was just for a short time, but it was quite beautiful. Asia told the blue-haired girl who looked out the window to stare at the flashes of light as they passed from the normal world to the underworld. There's much less fire and brimstone than we were told about in the sermons. In fact, I saw an abundance of greenery and forests when I was there.
That's because the Gremory territory is so big that besides from a few settlements of our household, we've left much of it untouched. Rias clarified, plus we don't have any oceans, only big lakes at best, so there is much more surface area for us to migrate over. You only get to migrate over half of it, princess. Azazel spoke from the bar as Rias and Akeno both frowned at his continued existence. We originally had the other half, but now that we're all working together I'm sure we can expand and prosper as one from now on. Oh, I'm sure we're just jumping at the opportunity. Asia, Xenovia, if you're looking for more of your typical description of hell, I'm sure the fallen angel side is more than familiar with it. Azazel chugged from his glass and swallowed. That's not true actually. We fallen angels pride ourselves on a society focused on the advancement of our agriculture, industrial, and technological cultures.
If there's something new we've made, you can bet we're already working on improving it as best we can. Also, there might be some unofficial spots for free lovin' scattered around the place, but that's only because my board shot down my expansion plan. The fallen angel downed the rest of his drink before letting out a delighted huff. But the place you're thinking of that most matches the Bible's description would be Hades, realm far below us.
Hades? Oh right. We have someone here who still needs a crash course in our world's history.
Naruto shuffled anxiously from the looks he got from his friends as Azazel pulled out his chair. See Naruto, fallen angels and devils and angels are a massive superpower and have influence over the whole world, but there are dozens of other mythologies and factions that still carry influence to this day. And each of them have heroes and fighters and gods that rival our own. Some of the gods from the other mythologies are older than any devil or angel, living long before humans ever walked the earth. Hell, I'm super old by your standards, but to them I'm nothing more than a baby, a little kid at best. Azazel's cocky expression started to waver as an irritated frown crossed his face. I'm actually getting kinda sick of being called brat by that old bastard Odin.
The power these deities hold is no laughing matter either. There are some select individuals from each mythology that could hold their own against my former power if the chance ever arose.
Seriously, D-Drag. Even you. Yep, and we're going to be meeting some of these gods at a gathering in the underworld in just a few weeks. Some of the devils looked to Rias for confirmation and the king nodded in agreement. We're gonna be meeting them soon, so when you do,
don't look at them, don't say anything to them that might make them mad. Don't do anything that might instigate an all-out war that could eradicate the entire population?
Actually, I was just going to tell you to grit your teeth because they're eccentric and can be kinda annoying. I mean, if you find me a handful. He raised his hand and stopped several people from voicing their opinions on the subject, then they're going to boggle your minds. Azazel pushed off his chair and strolled over to the bar, pulling out several cups and filling them with a finger of the best liquor he found in the stock, so enjoy your moment of freedom while you can.
Those aren't for us, are they? Of course. A drink to bond us for the commotion to come. You know, some people would look at the act of pouring your underage students hard liquor as a red flag. Well, some people aren't devils on a train going through a path between worlds to hell. Naruto rolled his eyes and stepped up to the counter next to Azazel. He picked up his glass and raised it before knocking it back. When he finished, he grimaced and shook his head violently. This tastes way worse than I thought it did. It's like medicine. Azazel smiled. The worse it tastes, the better it is for you. Rias strolled up and grabbed her glass as well. She downed it in one go and shook her head, spoken like a true alcoholic. Damn princess, you took that better than your boy toy. Years of sipping wine at those fancy parties must have really built up a tolerance. Akeno placed her glass down next and wiped her mouth. Faint praise from a man I assume regularly drinks his weight in booze? I wouldn't be surprised if you're 50% alcohol and 50% unspeakable miscellaneous elements. Peefed, I'm at least 97% pure badass. The other 3% is piss, vinegar, and special sauce. That was a combination no one wanted to know. Well, you do now. Azazel downed some more of the drink before pointing out, plus you know we've already arrived, right?
The students all turned to the window and noticed they were finally out of the light between worlds. The newer devils went up to the window and marveled at the expense of buildings and landscapes that made up the Gremory household. Rias stepped up to the glass and looked out as well with a smile. Welcome home.
Devil, welcome back. Oju-sama. The numerous gremmery maids and butlers bowed their heads once Rias and the devils entered. Rias simply nodded in return and walked by while the newer members of the peerage looked around at all the servants greeting them. Naruto stepped up to Rias' side. Do you come back to this each and every time?
Yes, Rias sighed. I try and tell them not to make such a big deal about it, but I think my concerns just fall on deaf ears. That's why I like to space my return trips out as much as possible. Of course, that's not to say there isn't anything about coming home that I don't enjoy. Rias Onisama. Rias turned around and braced herself as a short figure came running up and jumped into her chest. She wrapped her arms around it and spun with the move before chuckling and looking down with a smile. Well, hello, Milikas. How have you been? I have been fine, Onisama. The shorter figure finally disentangled from Rias and stepped back from her embrace. The young boy had short crimson hair and soft red eyes that sparkled when looking up at the older devils. He stood up straight and his young voice was soft and polite while speaking to his elders. Okawa-sama told me that you would be returning today with your peerage and I have been waiting all day.
Bucko, I didn't know you had a younger brother. I don't. Rias stepped up to the younger boy and they shared a smile. This is Milika's Gremory, my brother and Graphia's son. Graphia-sans, she's a mom. Issei was slapped across the head by Kaneko for his sudden exclamation. Your nephew, huh? Naruto snickered. I never would have taken you as an aunt. You're hotter than most old aunts I've seen. Rias smiled coyly. Don't push it, mister, or else I might get upset. She looked down at her excited nephew and smiled. Tell me, Milikas, is Oni-sama here today? No, Oto-sama is busy with some political matters so he can't come greet you today. He wanted to send his apologies for not being here to see you.
No need. Honestly makes the homecoming a little easier to bear. Rias muttered before she heard a set of footsteps make their way over from the side. When she spotted Graphia, the older redhead walking beside her, and the lovely brunette alongside him, she stood up a little straighter and fixed her posture. She bowed her head, and after a moment her peerage followed along. Otu-sama. Okawa-sama. I have returned. I'm glad to see you so happy, Rias. Her father greeted his daughter with a quick hug and an arm around her shoulder. I recognize some familiar faces, but notice a few new ones as well. Jasper-kun, it's good to see you out and about with my daughter again.
Thank you, sir. The boy in the cardboard box answered. I'm glad to be back after so long. Issei sweated. Are you really coming back if you're still sitting in a box? Some of your servants I still haven't been introduced to yet.
Rias nodded, of course. Otu-sama, this girl is Asia, my new bishop. The blonde girl bowed her head respectfully. This one is my newest addition and my knight, Zenobia. The former church warrior greeted the older devil politely, and that boy at the end is my pawn, Issei.
Oh, so this boy is the Red Dragon Emperor? Issei stood up straighter and had a nervous sweat as his king's father stepped up to face him. Greetings, Issei-san. There are quite a number of devils here that have high hopes for you in the future. Thank you, sir. Issei stuttered. I'll do my best to make Bucko, Rias-sama proud. Although after what happened recently that might be a further goal than I originally anticipated.
But still a goal. Zeoticus patted the brunette boy's shoulder, which means you can't give up yet, right? Issei showed a small smile and nodded. The Grimoire head nodded before finally turning to Naruto. Hello again, young man. I suppose it's only right to greet you into my home after you greeted me into yours. Nice to see you again, sir. Oh, come here. There's someone I've been meaning to introduce you to. Zeoticus led Naruto to the side and in front of a lovely young woman with long brown hair. Benalana, this is Rias' boyfriend, Naruto Uzumaki. He's the boy Searzex has been telling us about. Naruto-san, this is my wife, Benalana Grimoire.
Naruto's eyes widened and he stared at the youthful woman in disbelief.
On closer inspection he was surprised to see just how alike she looked in comparison to Rias. Hell, they looked downright identical to each other save for the hair color. Her eyes were deep and intense. She looked remarkably young, no older than a college girl and certainly not old enough to be both a mother and a grandmother. Her dress most likely hid her wonderful curves but did expose her cleavage and breast size. Rias certainly inherited her figure from somewhere.
A youthful, beautiful woman that looked much younger than she really was, and had a lot of power and very large breasts. You were thinking like Tsunade, weren't you? He didn't think that. Not at all.
Greetings, Naruto Uzumaki-san. Naruto was yanked from his thoughts as Venelana bowed her head graciously. It's comforting to know that my daughter is no longer being so obstinate about relationships as she was. I swear whenever I brought up the topic of partners or marriage she would just do everything she could to deflect the conversation. She was so immature. Oka-sama. The blood rushed to Ria's face and the usually level-headed girl was too flustered and shaky to take what her mother said. The other members of the peerage hid their chuckles under their breath while Zeoticus laughed at his daughter's reaction. You can't say stuff to him like that.
Rias, Venelana calmly responded. This is the first and possibly only boy you'll ever show interest in. I'm going to confront him and tell him my thanks. But, no buts young lady. Now about your level of intimacy.
Well, as much fun as this has been, and it's been a blast that I shall cherish for years to come, I think we need to move on. The sole fallen angel of the group spoke up and projected his voice. Azazel pocketed his phone, finished recording the hilarity before he stepped up. Zeoticus, it's good to see you again. And Venelana, a stunning portrait of perfection as usual. Greetings, Azazel-san. Hello Azazel, nice to see you again. Zeoticus and Azazel shook hands. How's life as a teacher treating you? Very interesting. Shaping young minds. Guiding the new generation. Plus there's always something to laugh at with your daughter and her friends. The older men chuckled together as Rias frowned and Naruto raised an eyebrow in bemusement. Azazel wiped a tear from his eye. So what's the news? Has anyone else arrived yet? Nearly a month ahead of schedule. Zeoticus rhetorically asked, the fallen angel simply shrugging in return. No, no one has arrived this early. Small miracles I suppose, since I am actually quite nervous about this meeting. No one knows what will happen when so many figures come together in one place. The world might just collapse on itself.
Well, I guess we'll cross that bridge when it comes. Azazel pulled out his phone again to check the time. Issei, you should head outside now. Huh? Why? Because I just got a message that your trainer is going to be arriving in a moment and it's important to make a good impression.
Issei blinked in confusion. My trainer. I didn't even know I had someone to specifically train me. Thank you Azazel-sensei for setting that up for me. No problem kiddo. Azazel chuckled and waved off Issei's thanks before pointing back to the entrance. Just get out there and make sure to greet them properly. Issei nodded and ran back out to the entrance to meet his trainer for the next few weeks. That kid's gonna be a powerhouse the next time we see him.
Azazel-sensei? Have you set up trainers for each of us? Yuto inquired. Sorry, but no, I do have some training regimes we can utilize to help get you started, but you'll have to look around for some serious assistance. I only got one for Issei because he needs serious improvement and the first person to come to mind. The ground shook and a massive gust of wind rushed out from the entrance. They looked back and saw two massive legs perched on the ground. Issei's minuscule frame standing between them as he looked up at the monster. Diedrich, is that you? You've lost some pounds. Are you going to make that joke every time, Tannen? Well, it makes me chuckle. Oh well, let's get started.
No. Issei turned and dashed for the door but the dragon's mighty talons came swinging down and grabbed him off the ground. Please. Not this. Anything but this. Too scary. Too scary. Azazel-sensei, you tricked me you damn bastard. I hope you rot in a depper pit of hell. Damn you.
Diedrich, can you calm down your new host? He's going to give me a headache and that's not the best thing to have while I'm flying. Honestly, quicker for you to power through than to get him to stop. Well, alright. Keep your bits tucked because here we go.
No. The ground shook again as the figure jumped off the ground and took flight. They spotted the form of a giant dragon soaring through the sky with Issei flailing around helplessly in his grasp.
Asia whimpered in horror while everyone else turned to Azazel. Does anyone else want me to pick their trainers? Devil, geez. This place seems even bigger than the last time I was here. Your parents don't expand their house overnight whenever they feel like it too, do they?
Not to my knowledge. Only Azazel and Oni-sama do things like that. Rias said, a hint of bitterness in her voice as they walked around the halls of the Grimoire household together. The redhead gave a haggard sigh and massaged her temples. You'd think the least they could do is give us a little warning before they did so. Ask us what we thought about it. It's infuriating.
Not a fan of the redesign? If they wanted a bigger building that's fine.
Rias answered, but I wish they wouldn't just change our home so haphazardly. Naruto saw Rias was so bothered by this change that she didn't even seem to notice that she had called the apartment their home. She had already moved on before he could point out the slip of the tongue. I've lived my whole life in big, roomy places like this. And for the first time I found myself in a smaller place where I can be comfortable with the boy I like. If it gets less personal and lonely. You fret about the most stupid things. Naruto slipped up to her side and pulled her close, earning a quick gasp from the crimson-haired girl as his hands settled on her waist. You know it was lonely because you had no one to share it with, but I'll be there now. I'll try to make it more bearable, so don't worry, okay? Rias pouted for a moment before giving a small nod in return, Naruto's smile widening as she subtly raised her arms and linked her hands behind his neck to compliment how close he had pulled her in. I'm sorry for being bothered by something so trivial. It just irks me when Oni-sama does things like this, and it doesn't help when Azazel acts so smug about it either. Naruto chuckled in agreement and the young couple shared a moment of laughter with their foreheads pressed together. They looked into each other's eyes before Rias looked aside. You know, I always felt like my room was too spacious and lonely. Do you mind fixing that as well?
Oh, might I have the honor of being the first guy in your room? Sorry, but that privilege went to Yuto when he joined the peerage years ago. Rias offhandedly answered with a coy smile, but if you want you can be the first boy I kiss in my room. Well, if you insist. Oh, Rias, you've returned. It's good to see you again. Both Naruto and Rias' faces fell as they were interrupted from their intimate moment. Naruto bit his lip. You don't think what Azazel said about the universe getting in the way of us is true, do you? One of these days we'll be savvy enough to do this with no one around and in a locked room. They separated and straightened their clothes as Rias greeted her tall relative with a lopsided smile. I didn't expect to see you here. Yes, I was invited by your father to come greet you, as well as pick up some information to bring back to my house as well. The large young man looked down at the blonde beside his cousin and grinned. We meet again it seems. Cyraorg, right? The larger devil grinned and nodded as Naruto smirked. Turning up just as we arrive. Is this by chance or are you stalking me? He, just by chance I can assure you. However, I am certainly fortunate to meet you again after all this time.
Cyraorg's eyes lowered and traveled back up Naruto's body as a smirk settled on his face as well. I see you have grown considerably stronger since I last met you. Your battles against the fallen angel Kokobile and the White Dragon Emperor have done wonders in advancing your strength, Naruto Uzumaki. Perhaps now is the time for us to have that match I asked for the last time we met. As tempting as that sounds, and I'm honored you're so ready to punch my face in like that, I don't think you'll get the match you're waiting for from me just yet. Naruto looked down and flexed his hand. The fight with Valley showed me that even with some of my old power back I still need to get ready for the fights ahead. I know you want a fight, but I think I can give you a better one if you just give me some time. It's regrettable we can't have a spar now, but I'm glad to hear that you aren't satisfied with your current level of power and wish to gain more. And I'm excited at the prospect of facing you when you at your peak. Cyraorg extended his hand to the blonde. I look forward to a match I can share with you at our best. You know, you remind me of an old friend of mine. Naruto took the offered hand, and noticed that it hurt much less to shake his hand now than it did months ago. You definitely would have gotten along. Way too energetic and charming for your own good. I'll take that as a compliment, Cyraorg chortled before turning back to Rias. How about you, Rias? Are you ready for the young devil meeting? I'm sure you'll have more than enough achievements to boast after all the fights in your town you were able to stop. Don't remind me. Rias rubbed her forehead to alleviate the stress. I can already tell that it's going to be a trial getting through that meeting. I can imagine the only saving grace being while I'm there that Sona will be by my side. And yes, I know you'll be there, and you'll probably be the biggest source of problems. Cyraorg laughed nervously but didn't argue her point as they both knew she was right. You'll probably get someone heated and they'll challenge you to a fight, and you won't be able to turn it down, and everything will just evolve from there. Rias turned to Naruto. Every year around this time a number of young devils representing their clans meet up to discuss matters of their houses. This year we're challenging each other in raiding games. Oh, that makes it much more interesting. But sorry big guy. Naruto shrugged apologetically towards Cyraorg who tilted his head curiously. If it's a raiding game you're waiting for us to fight in then we might never get the chance. Apparently with me being some crazy unprecedented pawn, Rias shouldn't be allowed to have. I'm not usually allowed to participate in those. The large Bale devil seemed utterly broken at the idea as his skin slowly turned paler. He clenched his fist and struggled with his emotions before stepping forward and clapping Naruto on the shoulder. We shall convince them otherwise, Naruto Uzumaki. It's too early to give up hope yet. Soon you will find yourself on the battlefield of a raiding game and we shall share in a fantastic battle to shake the very ground we stand on. The old devils may seem set in their ways, but I've convinced them before and I can do it again.
Cyraorg, please don't cause more of a fuss than you usually do. I don't want a headache having to deal with your battle maniac tendencies again. Rias seemed exhausted of her cousin's antics and the trouble he might cause.
Cyraorg just laughed before his hands started to glow. He looked down and saw a magic circle appear in his hand. Oh, I'm being called back. I've probably spent longer than I should have coming here greeting you. My peerage will be upset if I dawdle any longer. I'll see you at the meeting, Rias. And it was a pleasure to see you again as well, Naruto Uzumaki. The couple watched the heir to the Bale clan run down the hall and back towards the exit. Rias called out for him to be careful around her home before a small chuckle escaped with her sigh. He smiled. He seems like a pretty cool guy.
He can be quite a handful, but I know from experience just how earnest and noble he is. You'd never think he was the heir to the great king of devils just from how he acts. And he's your cousin. Naruto chuckled, still having a hard time wrapping my head around that one.
Well, it's true, so get used to it. And you should put off fighting him for a while. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at Rias' cautious tone. We couldn't beat Cyraorg right now no matter how hard we tried. And even with your senjutsu, it'd probably be hard won. He is the strongest devil of our generation by a very wide margin. And if we ever want to beat him, we still have a long way to go to become strong enough to do it. Stop it.
What? Stop smiling like that. I can tell you want to try fighting him now, but I'm saying no.
I'm not thinking that at all. Yes, he is. Rias crossed her arms. Thank you, Kurama. No problem. Naruto scowled. You know, you'd think because we've been together for 18 years and we fought together in a war, we'd be inseparable friends and partners. So it kinda hurts that you take her side over mine. She's pleasant. Shut up. And stop looking so smug. Rias continued to preen from Kurama's compliment and continued support while the blonde man just frowned in response. He scratched the back of his head with a groan. I'm excited at the idea of fighting him, but I'm not gonna jump into a fight just yet. Valley showed me there is a lot I have to be prepared to face in this world. So I gotta get out there and train.
Rias nodded. Well, everyone else has already gone off to do their training, so you'll have to look for them if you want to train together. Yeah, and I better get started before I lose any more.
Hold on a moment, Naruto-san. Naruto and Rias jumped back in fright at the sudden appearance of the redhead's mother. Oh, Okawa-sama, what are you doing here?
Well, since this man is your lover and future betrothed, I decided I wanted to gauge him for myself.
Whoa, that might be a little ahead. Naruto-san. Benalana turned to Naruto and his throat went dry under her scrupulous gaze. There is a standard of what to expect from those that marry into the Grimoire household. And as the matriarch of this family, I take that responsibility onto myself. The brunette Madam of Extinction stared into his blue eyes, so I must see how you measure up.
Naruto sweated and gulped. How exactly, devil? And 1 2 3, and 1 2 3, and move with the beat, and keep eye contact at all times. When your mom said she was going to test me, this wasn't what I expected.
My mother takes these duties very seriously. Rias lamented regretfully while she and her boyfriend danced across the ballroom while Benalana kept the beat. Naruto had one hand on her waist to pull her in closely while his other grasped Rias, the two of them waltzing over the dance floor after being dragged there by the overbearing mother. And can you really not keep up? You move like you have 2 left feet. Well, sorry, I'm not used to dancing like this. In my defense, this was a pretty drastic change than what I thought we were coming down here for. They stumbled as Naruto's foot clumsily hit Rias again and made him hiss in anger. Can't you just lead?
Fine, let's do that. Rias started changing positions with Naruto until she was the one with the leading position. Now follow my lead. Rias. The young devils froze again as Benalana appeared right beside them without either noticing. She looked at her daughter sternly. Why don't you go practice with Milikas? He could use a more experienced partner. I'll dance with Naruto-san in your stead.
Oh okay. Rias untangled herself and quickly ran off, abandoning her pawn to her mother's mercy. Naruto felt betrayed watching her run away but felt his hands get moved to conform to another body. He looked down and saw Venelana had already taken her place as his dancing partner. Shall we begin?
Alright, so I'm not really, you can look at your feet while we dance if you want.
Naruto let out a sigh of relief and did just that as they started dancing again. Their movement was slow and deliberate but much less hazardous now that Naruto could see where his feet were going. I'm sorry if I've come across as domineering and strict. It's just how I've been able to get the best results as quickly as possible. You must understand this was the best course of action while raising children like Sirzex and Rias.
And no, it's okay ma'am, I understand, thank you.
Venelana expressed her gratitude with a softer tone before she looked over across the dance floor. She saw Rias dancing along with Milika's, her hands lowered to make up for their difference in height as the two chuckled at their topic of conversation. I've never seen her act or smile the way she does when she's with you. It's something different and new compared to the one she shows when she's with us. One filled with new emotion and apprehension and excitement for someone else. Naruto blinked. Ma'am, I never got the chance to thank you for assisting her in the raiding game. That wedding had been disputed and argued for a long time by a lot of devils only interested in keeping the noble lines pure. You did something that got a lot of people angry, but someone willing to fight and go that far for another's happiness is someone I can trust to keep my daughter happy. Thank you for putting my heart at ease.
Naruto was thankful his head was down to watch his own feet as he blushed from the earnest sincerity in her gratitude. You're welcome. I just didn't want Rias to be unhappy. That's good. And now the two of you are starting something new. So have you consummated your relationship yet?
Naruto nearly tripped over his own feet if it weren't for Venelana's strong grip on his body keeping him level. Still his face turned bright red as he looked up into Venelana's still gaze. What? I asked if you had bedded her yet. Or if she has taken the initiative and made the first move. Venelana so casually asked the question that Naruto had difficulty trying to wrap his mind around it. When he failed to answer, Venelana sighed with disappointment. So you haven't taken the next step in your relationship. And I would have thought Rias was confident enough to take action. Have you two really not done anything together? Not what you're thinking. He responded a little louder than he wanted to and coughed before trying to focus on something else. We've kissed, and held hands, and we sleep in the same bed. We haven't done that, but we've done other things. The blonde struggled to speak and shook his head. Can we please not talk about this? This is an important discussion. If you two don't want to continue into a more physical relationship, then that is something you need to discuss with each other. There's no reason for this to be awkward, it's a very natural thing. Actually, I think talking about my sex life with my girlfriend's mother, who looks exactly like her, and is pressed up to me very closely while dancing, is more than enough reason to feel awkward about this discussion. He tried to look down at his feet to dance again but choked when he realized just what was a little higher in his sights.
Damn it, did they have to be so big? And why couldn't she be wearing something less showy like a regular grandma? Venelana realized that the dancing session had come to a stop and stepped away from the frozen boy. I suppose that's enough dancing for today. Work on your coordination and being able to keep with the timing and you'll be able to woo anyone on the floor. The pawn's brain seemed to finally start working again as he nodded and hid his blush. Okay, so we're done now, right? Cool, I need to go and start my train. Not so fast. The Gremory mother grabbed Naruto's collar before he could dart off and kept him in place. We've only had dancing lessons. There's still much to learn if you are going to be a representative of Gremory in the future. But I'm not good with this stuff. It's for Ria's benefit. His argument came to a screeching halt as she nodded her head. That's what I thought.
Devil. And so when the original Mao died fighting the Lord of the Bible, there was a period between their deaths and the formation of the new Mao system where a different power took control and lead the devils. The leader was from the Baal clan and was the first great king of devils. Since then there has been contention between the followers of the great king and followers of the new Mao. Now who can tell me the name of the first great king? Venelana inquired of her two students. Anyone?
Oh, one little hand shot up and waved for attention. Milika's, do you have the answer? Yes. It was Zekrom by El Sama. Our ancestor and the very first patriarch of the Bael clan.
Correct. Zekram Baal Sama led the devils for centuries before the new Maos were picked. Of course, as with any change in power, there are those that sympathize with the great king's stance and those that follow the new power. Very good, Milikas. The young devil beamed with joy at the praise from his grandmother before she turned her gaze with disappointment to the other member of their classroom. Did you write that down, Naruto-san?
The tired blonde ran a hand through his ragged hair and nodded. I got it down in Japanese. I told you to write your notes in devil letters. I can't write those yet. You'll never learn if you don't try first.
This still looks like chicken scratch to me. Don't get testy, Naruto-san, this is a place of learning. Venelana calmly deflected. Now here is a question for you. What were the former houses the current 4 Mao belonged to before taking up their current positions?
Naruto scratched his head and pored over his notes. Gremory, Sirzex came from Gremory before becoming Lucifer. That is correct. That's also the easiest one for you to answer considering you are part of our household. And the other 3? Citri, she nodded and Naruto scratched his head. There's, You can do it, Naruto-san. Milikas eagerly whispered and cheered him on. I know you can. The other 2 are, I can't do it. Naruto jumped out of his chair gripping his hair. It's just too much. I'm sorry ma'am, but existing is so not worth this torment.
Venelana and Milikas were both startled when Naruto punched himself in the face and popped in a plume of smoke. It disappeared with no whiskered man in sight as Venelana looked around. Naruto-san. Where has he gone? Venelana stepped out the door. Naruto-san.
Milikas stared at the empty chair in surprise before looking around the room. He looked down at his hand and balled it up into a tiny fist. He knocked himself on the head. Ow. That's not fair. Devil, looks like the clone took the easy way out. She is going to be pissed when she gets her hands on you again. Gonna want to avoid that from now on. He made a mental reminder to never be alone with Ria's mother again or suffer the consequences.
The whiskered devil made his way through the thick forest of the Grimoire territory in the same red jumpsuit he had worn after the raiding game with Razor. He was glad he brought it along to train in because he wasn't looking forward to tearing up his school uniform anymore after all the fighting. If Rias offered to pay for another pair one more time, he was going to drop to his knees in shame. He stretched out his limbs and closed his eyes to enter his mindscape. So how's it coming in here? Not at all, that's how. Kurama angrily answered with a scowl as he continued to sit in the void and try and collect his chakra. With each passing second his evil scowl grew deeper and deeper with his failure to summon his power before he roared, damn it. Nothing. I still can't mold my chakra. I can't even reach it. You aren't that out of practice, are you? It ain't just that. I can't reach it at all. Like I go inside to tap into it but it's disappeared. It's getting pulled somewhere else. I don't know how to describe it but I know I'm not using it. Kurama grumbled and shook his head, his ears flopping around on his head before he sighed. Sorry Naruto, but right now my power and help is pretty much a non-factor. I figured as much. Naruto kicked the water around his feet. If we hadn't made any headway by this point, I doubted something was miraculously going to change now. Guess we'll just have to keep going as we are now. Yeah, but how is that going to change anything? It's still impossible for you to use Sage Mode while moving and still no summoning available. You could try creating more of the Rasengan forms you used when you had my power, but it's gonna be pretty damn difficult with just you and a few clones. Actually, that gave me an idea. Naruto cupped his chin. The Rasenshurikens I created with Rias and Akeno and Issei were crazy powerful. It's like when I created them, just adding any power into its form doubled or even tripled the power, and when it was boosted it rocked the entire town. That was a surprise. It took a lot of training and practice for you to integrate shape and element manipulation together like that. But what they use is different. Naruto looked at his hands. Rias said this power that comes with being a devil is based around our will and imagination. It can become anything and be used however I see fit. So if I want it to mold with the Rasengan, it might just work. He just had to put it to practice. Naruto opened his eyes and returned to the real world. Only to realize he was inches away from a very large, rough face staring directly at him. Oh hey, was wondering if you were still in there. Ah.
Naruto jumped back and raised his fists before vaguely recognizing the strange man watching him. Wait, don't I know you?
Not really. We only met once in passing, but it's nice to know you recognize this mug. The man stood up, and it was only then that Naruto noticed he was bent down to be on his eye level. The huge man with spiky orange hair nodded to the blonde. I'm Surtur II. Nice to properly introduce myself to Haim's little boyfriend.
Haim? Hey guys, he's over here. Some footsteps echoed out from the forest as figures came to stand by Surtur's side. He was standing like a dead statue and everything, and I got worried. But it's all cool now. Second, please tell me you didn't scare him stiff or anything. Nah, he was out before I even came up to him. He came back and screamed when he saw me though. Well, that's expected considering how scary you look.
I didn't scream. Naruto interjected in the group's discussion before looking between the four of them. A massive man towering above the others, a raggedy man with mixed hair, and two youthful men wearing a coat and the other a hakama. Wait, I know you guys. Weren't you in Searzek's study after the raiding game?
Good memory. The hakama-wearing man politely nodded. I would think after your heated match in the raiding game and with the discussion you had with Searzek-sama immediately after, you would not remember us. Hey, that means we left an impression. The man in the collared jacket emanated with joy as he looked between his friends. That means he must like us, right? I think we are the ones who left an impression. You probably just faded into the background or molded with the wall.
You tend to do that. What? No way. I was there and I didn't mold into anything. The young man seemed to panic from his friend's disinterested stares before he ran up and grabbed Naruto's shoulders desperately. Kid, you remember me, right? I exist, right? I was there with the others after the game, remember?
Were you? Naruto's sudden honest response caused the man to gasp and shuffle back in horror. He watched the man drop to his knees depressed before shaking his head. Okay. Not gonna bother with the befuddlement. Who the fuck are you guys? There you are, Naruto-kun. Flying down from over the trees, a familiar redhead dropped to the ground and stepped up to their side. I just got a notice from my mother about your disappearance. She is not happy with you. Searzek. Naruto saw another unfamiliar man drop down behind the Mao but focused on the only person he knew. Do you know all these people? Of course I do. They're members of my peerage. Searzek stepped around the blonde, pawn, lifting his depressed servant back up to his feet and placing him along with his other followers. I'd like you to meet by night, Soji Okita. The pleasant hakama-wearing man bowed his head. A pleasure to meet you, young man. My Bishop, McGregor Mathers. I remember your match with the Phoenix Boy quite well. The mixed-haired man grinned and sent a chill down Naruto's back. I'm still waiting for my chance to examine you myself. The big fella in the back is one of my rooks, Surtur II. Boss Searzek has been talking you up a lot, kid. Haim must be in good hands if he trusts you with her. And the one in the middle of his existential crisis is my pawn, Beowulf. I exist. I truly exist. But it is simply a state of being. I think therefore I am. But what do I think I am? This is your peerage? The men greeted Naruto once again as Searzek nodded his confirmation. The blonde stood silent before turning around to the last new person in the clearing. Then who is this man? L?
The man silently staring at him was someone he did not recognize in any capacity. He was a tall man who looked as young as Searzek and had striking eyes that grabbed Naruto's attention. His green hair was pulled back over his head and he continued to stand there in silence despite the attention he had drawn. Searzek stepped forward and motioned the strange man forward before he actually complied.
Naruto-kun, I want you to meet an old and close friend of mine, Ajuka Beelzebub. He's a fellow Mao like me. Searzek patted Ajuka on the shoulder. Ajuka, this is the boy I was telling you about.
The green-haired man offered his hand and Naruto raised his to shake. But Ajuka's hand jerked forward and grabbed Naruto's wrist and pulled him in. The blonde yelled before he felt a hand press into his chest and push his sternum. I feel the evil piece inside of him. You were right, Searzek, this is quite peculiar. Rias used the evil piece I got from you to bring him back. She had used her original 8 pawns to resurrect the Sekurut, Issei Hyoto-kun. Yet she was still able to use a foreign piece to bring him back to life. So Ajuka, what was that pawn you gave me?
Ajuka finally pulled his hand off Naruto's chest and looked the younger man in the eye. Something I never believed would actually work.
What? When I created the evil piece system, it wasn't perfect.
I had to create many prototypes and models before finally perfecting the pieces we use today. The piece I created just prior to the final model were prototypes I could not accurately rein in. Each evil piece now is capable of accurately gauging one's potential to decide how strong they currently are. If an individual is extremely powerful, they may require multiple pieces, and if they grow stronger, then those pieces can grow into mutated pieces. Ijuka explained, I needed to do this because when I tried to gauge the power of my prototypes, nothing was compatible.
Not a single person or creature I tested it on could accept the power of that thing. I deemed it a dud and moved on to the next model. With it I created new features like promotion and real-time location for their respective king. Ijuka pointed at Naruto's chest. I found that evil piece prototype in my workstation while I was clearing out. I was going to throw it away but Sears was visiting that day and so I just dumped it on him.
After that I was clearing out my desk and gave it to Rias in turn. And then she used it on you to bring you back to life. Not exactly the glamorous tale I was expecting for this thing.
That evil piece was something I couldn't use despite being its creator. Ijuka looked Naruto in the eyes. You are the first and possibly only being that evil piece could bond to. I don't usually like to look back over my own work, but I'll need to rethink that to see how you proceed from here on out. What you have inside of you is not just an illegal piece, it's an impossible piece.
My impossible evil piece. Naruto held a hand to his chest before a small smug smile grew. I guess I'll just have to live with that knowledge that I have something no one else could handle inside me. He. Well, you certainly seem amused, Naruto-kun. Sears chuckled. Did you come out here to train? Yeah, I thought I could get away and work on some things that needed my attention. Well, I'm glad to hear you want to grow so much. If you're interested, we may be willing to help.
Seriously. That'd be great. Thank you. Naruto looked around at the strange interested looks he was getting from Sears, his peerage and Ijuka. Wait. Did you say we? Of course. We're gifted with the chance to train with the boy carrying an impossible piece. Sears smiled sweetly. You can understand why we might all be excited at the chance to train with you. Quick question. Have you seen a movie back in the other world called Whiplash?
No. Well then this is going to be fun. Oh. Quick, 2 choices. These psychos are the mother. Now this was a rock or a hard place scenario if he'd ever been in one. Omake. Culture shock, folklore. So why did we get out all these folk books? Bucko and Naruto-san suddenly started searching through every book that they could. Apparently some of our old myths and legends correspond with Naruto-san's original world. That's way too crazy to just be a coincidence. So, this Sasuke Sarutobi ninja that appears in the stories, you met him? No, I knew a guy named Sasuke, and several people named Sarutobi, but no one with that name. Asia deflated with disappointment, although that name sounds familiar but I can't put my finger on it. And the creature residing in you? Zenobia held up her book next. Really resemble these foxes from this country's lore? Other 9-tailed foxes? Now that would be an interesting experience. I never met a fox like me back in our world. Well, there are plenty of them here, Kurama-san. Maybe you'll be fortunate and meet one someday. An entire world filled with Japanese stories and mythological figures with actual, physical forms.
Ninjas and samurais and kunai and shuriken, Rias whispered, her eyes sparkling and enchanted by the world that embodied everything she loved about Japanese culture. She pressed into Naruto's side and nudged him repeatedly. One of these days we're going to sit down and you are going to tell me every last detail you remember of your world. Okay. Do you promise? You promise, right? You have to keep your promises to me, okay? Rias calmed down. The blonde tried to pacify the shaking redhead, putting down his book to grab her shoulders as her eyes swam in her head and she tried to catch her breath. You're gonna pass out from hyperventilating. Rias' eagerness started to subside and her odd behavior started to disappear. When it did, the devil looked around at the odd looks she was getting from her peerage at her sudden change in demeanor. She coughed into her hand and tried to hide the faint pink heat that dusted her cheeks. Sorry, that was unprofessional of me. Kaneko told me you like Japanese stuff but you really lose your shit when you get the chance. No I don't, Bucko-san.
Might this be that otaku behavior I heard so much about?
Rias Bucho is an otaku. That's interesting. I'm not. She denied but failed to convince anyone of her stance. She looked to the blonde at her side to see if he of all people would believe that she was merely just interested and not obsessed, but noticed his attention was already snatched up by something else. She looked down at the storybook in his lap. What are you reading?
Some old folklore. Naruto spoke with disinterest, but the subtle smile on his face as his eyes roamed over the pages was unmistakably fond of what he read, kind of a silly story. Are you kidding, senpai? I loved reading that story as a kid. Issei grinned. I always loved the story of a hero saving the princess from the evil villain and saving the day. Plus a frog wins against a snake. How awesome is that? Akeno laughed and started explaining the story in greater detail to the confused Asia and Zenobia. Naruto just closed the book shut and looked down at the ridiculous title once again. The Tale of the Gallant Jiraiya. Peeved, Naruto scoffed with a smile. Stupid braggart. Devil. I dare you to say that again, you uppity bitch. Don't bare your teeth. I'm simply noting the reason this meeting had to start so much later than originally planned was because you were late. So asking when it will be over is very obnoxious of you.
I hate the sound of your voice. Sitting up in your chair like you're all prim and proper. Guess the Archduchess has to play the boss bitch persona as best as she can. The harsh, gruff voice patronized before the sharp-eared young man snarled. You actually think you're better than me, don't you? I don't think I'm better than anyone. The lovely blonde young woman fixed the glasses up her bridge and opened her pink eyes. She crossed her arms beneath her considerable buxom, but with how you're acting right now it can be argued that you are objectively worse than everyone else at the moment. You know you're really mouthy for a bitch that probably ain't popped the cherry yet. The dark-skinned devil sneered and derided the regal beauty that narrowed her eyes at his statement, as that by design, or far more likely all the boys and girls run off from the sheer pressure of that stick up your ass. Probably the only one you'll ever get anyway. My, you are as vulgar as ever. Sikvera sighed. Do your paid consorts actually enjoy that part of spending the evening with you, or do they have to stomach it like the rest of their time around you?
Ooh. Zephyrdoor scoffed and gave something between a chuckle and giggle as he shook his head. I might get in serious trouble after this, because I think I'm gonna kill this bitch right where her fat ass sits. I think you mean try. Sikveria spoke in her stoic voice despite her goading. You're going to try and kill me, and certainly fail.
Rias sighed into her hand as Zephyrdoor nearly leapt over the table to maul the Archduchess. Thankfully Saraorg was there in time to snatch the irritable Glacial Labalas out of the air before he could reach his pouncing target. Sikvera simply adjusted her glasses casually as Saraorg chuckled. Now, no reason to resort to such violence with just some playful goading. We all take a moment to breathe and I'm sure cooler heads will prevail.
Fuck you Saraorg. If I wanted the advice from a goody-goody, I'd shoot myself in the head before I came to you. Zephyrdoor flailed around in Saraorg's grasp like a wildcat. Don't think just because you're a little stronger than me that I won't.
Nap time. Hey. The sharp-eared devil gagged as Saraorg wrapped an arm around his neck and started to apply pressure. His face turned purple from the lack of air as he slapped a hand against the Bale's massive bicep. Fuck, your arm is too big.
Yes, it's very meaty, don't fight it. Arguing and bickering in Saraorg choking someone out by restricting their airflow. Yep, it was a meeting between the young devils alright. The lovely redhead's seafoam eyes slowly roamed over the room and took in all the familiar faces she hadn't seen in nearly a year.
Sikvera Agaraz was still as composed and regal as ever despite the close threat to her life moments ago. Her blonde hair was tinged with a tone of green and her sharp face accentuated her beauty. She was dressed in more respectable garbs for a lady of her position. Looks like the title of Archduchess wasn't going to be wasted on her. Saraorg was still dressed in his battle outfit. The one he seemed to wear now as his casual clothing. With his big smile and joyful demeanor, Rias wouldn't have imagined he had just choked another devil into unconsciousness just moments ago. And of course the twitchy devil in question was still as brash and loudmouth as ever. Honestly, Zelfador had always tried to match his bite with his bark for as long as Rias had known him. Boy or man, he was eager to pick fights and goad anyone who would listen. And that was a trait that hadn't changed even after he had become the head of his family. And finally sitting at the side of the table with a pleasant smile on his face was Diodora. While the commotion with Zelfador was going on and Sikvera pointing out the strangeness of choking him out to a chuckling Saraorg, he simply sat by with a good-natured smile and a nervous laughter. As the next head of the Astaroth clan and with an elder sibling taking the position of Mao, Rias should have felt a type of camaraderie with the boy similar to the one she had with Sona.
Unfortunately, she could never shake the strange unnerving feeling when around him.
You look so subdued. Rias' eyes fluttered up and saw Sona coming around the table to sit by her. Usually the attendants had an unspoken agreement to sit away from each other with equal space between them. But seeing as the meeting had basically devolved this far, it looked like no one would care if two friends sat together, upset you didn't get to join in on the dispute.
Not at all. Rias responded with a coy smile. I think I'm content not jumping into the middle of an argument that would end with me being put in a chokehold. Would Saraorg do that to his own cousin? I'm not willing to risk it. Fair enough, but it's clear there's something on your mind. Sona tilted her head and let one of her short black bangs cross over her piercing violet eyes. So what is it?
Rias let out a tired sigh and leaned on her hand. I guess I'm just bored of sitting around. I remember doing this last year on summer vacation and I didn't find this so mundane. Rias' face scrunched up with annoyance. So what changed exactly?
Sona let out a small laugh behind her hand before shaking her head and wiping her eye. Do you really not know what's different this time compared to last year? Rias blinked. No, but by the look on your face I don't think I'll like the answer. Why Rias, I believe you're experiencing the symptoms of a lonely lover.
I was right. Just applying logic. Her friend responded with a wry smile on her usually stoic face, no doubt from the subtle enjoyment she was getting at seeing Rias' expression deepen with every passing second. The only things to change since last year were the additions of your new servants to your peerage. One of those servants happens to be your boyfriend, a prospect you didn't even think about entertaining 1 year ago. But now here you are, in the same meeting with the same people and without Uzumaki-kun to spend time with, so now you're bored. And here I find you, pining after your lover.
I hardly think I'm the pining type. That's not true, because here you are doing it right now.
Rias rolled her eyes and forced out a laugh to appease Sona's ego, hoping every last drop of condescension was evident in her tone. But while she would never voice her thoughts, she had to admit there was a small part of her that wanted to talk with Naruto again and spend some time with him. Not to the forlorn lover status Sona had suggested, but, well, contact was normal for teenagers in a relationship, wasn't it? Sue her. But seriously, one moment he had gone off to a classroom with her mother and Milika's, and the next he was gone. Apparently somewhere in the day he had switched with a clone to slip out while the clone took all the classes. And apparently it could only take so much before resorting to popping itself.
Needless to say, her mother was not amused. So how is your peerage doing here? Sona spoke up again and Rias was happy to follow the change in subject. They all went off to train, didn't they?
Most of them. Rias nodded. Asia is training her twilight healing on some injured we have here in the household while Akino supervises. Gasper mostly keeps to his own room and Kaneko is pushing herself to try and train more, which has me worried. Zenobia is getting some tips for training from Azazel so she can better wield Durandal. And Yuto went off to get some more instruction from Soji.
Well, they certainly sound busy. And what of Hyodo-kun during all this?
Issei. Well, devil. Dying. I'm dying. Someone help me because I'm about to die. Heal p. My, Diedreg, this new vessel of yours has quite the set of lungs on him. Tannen, the massive purple dragon, floated in the air while Issei's helpless scream died in the flurry of snow and mountain range. His wings flapped behind him as his voice carried over the deafening snowstorm. You've been teaching him how to project, or is that all just natural talent?
Yes, his best skills seem to rest in the areas not dealing with fighting. I'm sorry there isn't a skill tree I can dump all my points into. Okay DDRAIG, so help me. Diedreg can't help you like this. The Dragon King warned with his arms folded over in a patient stance. Boosted gear can double your power every 10 seconds in the state it is now, but you'll have to keep using that power to help you move and make sure you don't fall off. The only way you'll safely make it off here is if you can activate your balance breaker. So I have to keep climbing this mountain until I find my scale mail? No, Tannen shook his head. You don't have to climb the mountain. Tears filled Issei's eyes as he hung his head. "Oh, thank you. Thank you, merciful."
A fireball impacted the mountainside just left of Issei. It exploded and the perverted brunette stared at the spot as flames wafted over him for an instant before disappearing. He looked back and up at his instructor.
"You're climbing and evading." Flames pooled in Tannen's mighty jaw. "Ready?" "Devil, he should be fine." Rias answered. "He's sturdier than he looks and I trust that he's working on getting stronger."
Our new pawns are quite energetic, don't you think? Both girls shared a nod of agreement as the room went back into its manic state when Zephyr regained consciousness and threatened to skin the happily chuckling Saroorg alive. "So where do you think your current paramour is up to?"
"You're enjoying yourself more than I thought you would." Sona gave a wry smile in response as Rias crossed her arms with frustration. "Whatever it is, I can't imagine it's more dangerous than what Okawa-sama has in store for him."
Devil. Hiya. Beowulf lurched backwards and dropped down to avoid the path of Naruto's fist. He spun on the ground and aimed to sweep out the blonde's leg. But Naruto leapt over it and quickly raised his guard as the older pawn snapped up and landed a kick against his arms. Naruto went flying through the air and flipped a few times before landing on the ground across from his opponent, perched to respond to the next attack.
"That was amazing, young master. Your power is astounding and your movement is phenomenal. I should expect nothing less from someone Heim has chosen to be by her side and who Searsx-sama has so much faith in." "I appreciate the praise." Naruto nodded with a slight smile, making sure his defense didn't fall for a second against the surprisingly quick and nimble fighter.
When he was sectioned off to spar against this man, he was planning to take it easy on him. And when the older gentleman started to boast that he was one of the 5 strongest pawns in the underworld, Naruto didn't really understand the weight and brevity of the acclaim. The only pawns he knew were himself, Issei, and the sandy blonde from the stucco. When the older pawn demanded he get ready for a fight, after some encouragement from Searsx he finally obliged and entered Sage mode. Their sparring match began and immediately the more experienced pawn kept his distance and avoided Naruto's reach by a wide margin. He had probably heard about how his punches could still hit even when they missed and decided that avoiding them completely was the best course of action.
It was actually kinda annoying that all these people were learning about his skills and developing countermeasures before even meeting him. It just was not fair. "Well, I think that's enough complimenting in the middle of our spar." He smirked and raised his guard again. "Let's go, kid." "Got it, guy?" They stood across from each other in silence before the older pawn wavered and lowered his guard. Wait, hang on. Why you know my name, right? You remember it. You have to. Searsx-sama told you my name, remember? I am sorry, really, I was a little preoccupied by all the people suddenly showing up, so.
Beowulf. It's Beowulf. This Beowulf is an actual existence and he is right here. The formerly proud and noble warrior was now hunched over the ground like an empty husk. He kept running his fingers through the ground and spelling out his name multiple times in different languages. Looks like it didn't take much to destroy the descendant of an ancient hero. He would have considered this a win, but it made him feel guilty.
Oddly enough, despite the awkwardness, this Naruto couldn't help but feel like he got the luckiest draw.
Devil. Naruto's jerked his head aside to avoid the tip of the blade from poking through his head. Even a cut on the cheek would pop him and end the exercise. Fortunately his sage mode was helping him avoid it. Unfortunately, the guy swinging the sword was apparently the best to ever hold a blade and was sparring with him with the intent to cut.
Your ability to dodge is phenomenal. I come within millimeters of cutting you and you evaded with deft agility and movement. The older swordsman swung his katana around with impeccable control and precision. The whiskered blonde continued to duck and dodge as the space around him was weaved with flashes of silver from the speed of the blade. The katana blurred to such extents that when Okita finally made it stop there were gusts of wind kicked up by the sudden halt, the hakama-wearing knight showing a shrewd smile as he raised his sword back into his stance, but you do not seem to be taking the initiative and attacking in return. Because every time I feel like there's an opening, you close it with another swing. The clone complained with a huff and angry tone as he threw his hand out. I mean, were you born with a sword in your hand? Is this more of that crazy speed that comes with being a knight? Well, that does play a part in it, I suppose. Okita shrugged. But to be fair, I have been swinging swords most of my life, and I was still quite adept with them even before I was reincarnated.
Yeah, of course. And if I was a normal pawn, I could do that promotion thing and have that speed on top of my sage power. But I don't, because apparently the Mao get bored and don't finish their shit before it's done. Naruto muttered before glaring at their audience. Does that seem fair to you? Well, your sage mode already encompasses the aspects of increasing your strength, speed, and energy usage. Plus you can use it whenever you want, while a normal pawn can only do it in enemy zones. Technically, your technique has the advantage, as well as the added benefit of sensing others' movement.
I guess. The blonde frowned but conceded the point before tilting his head. Why are you watching this again?
Master offered me the chance to sit down and observe your spar for myself. Yuto answered, seated patiently by the trees with his sword placed to the side like a kendo student watching a match. I'm supposed to be training with him right now, but since he already had plans to train with you, the least I can do is watch and learn from your fight. Study your movements and comprehend your techniques.
Oh, I guess that okay. Naruto shrugged before he frowned. But lately I feel like everybody's getting the chance to watch me fight and analyze my techniques. How the hell am I gonna surprise people when I'm fighting if they already know everything I can do? We live in an age where everything is recorded and can be viewed by others at any time. Sorry Naruto-san, but if you're looking for privacy and secrecy, then this is not the right place for you to be fighting.
Oh, for fuck's sake. I suppose it truly is not a prime place for someone of the shadows such as you to be fighting in, but the ideal time for one such as us has passed. If we do not adapt, we will find ourselves left behind by everyone else. Okita spoke up, an amused smile on his face with his sword lying over his shoulder. You once followed the way of the ninja, while long ago I walked the path of a samurai. You're a samurai? Naruto asked, a laugh slipping out as he crossed his arms with amusement. I should have figured from the way you swing that thing. I didn't fight alongside the samurai for long, but I remember them being great with blades. And I remember shinobi and members of the Anawaban being quite adept in their field of espionage. I remember crossing steel with them a number of times while I was on duty.
Yuto chuckled. You're not usually this reminiscent, master.
I know, this is quite different for me. Okita said as he chuckled and lifted the blade off his shoulder. Being here, training with this lad and wielding this sword has made me feel quite nostalgic. With a last moment of wistful remembering, the former Shinsengumi captain took his sword in hand and raised it into his fighting stance. Let us fight once more, young shinobi. But how about now? You stop holding back so we can actually start having fun.
Oh, you noticed that? Naruto smirked before raising his fists. Well, how about you do the same? Very well, if you insist. Okita smirked and held the blade out to his side. He turned the katana around and allowed it to shine under the light from the colorful sky.
Naruto wasn't sure if it was instinct, reflex, his sage mode, the sparks he saw coming off the blade, or how Yuto ducked his head in preparation for the swing. But Naruto kicked off his feet and fell backwards in time to see a blindingly fast slash fly over his face and cleave through several rows of trees behind him. The moment he hit the ground, he leapt back up on his feet and stared at his opponent. A large monster started to come into view behind Okita and snarled at the whiskered blonde. The creature was an amalgamation of several different animals all mixed together, a monkey for the face and a tiger for the body with a snake head for the tail. The yokai let out a low growl as sparks started to dance over the body of the blade again. I have shown you my hand, young shinobi. Now will you answer in kind? He always liked this. Yuto gave an ambiguous shrug as Naruto smirked and created a blue orb in the palm of his hand. Well, since you insist. Devil. Rasengan. 5x. Loop. Naruto lunged across the clearing and slammed his jutsu against the body of his foe. The spiraling sphere glowed at the moment of impact and released a massive blast of air and sound when it burst. The young sage jumped back after his attack had finished and stared the repeated blasts happening over and over against his foe. They finally stopped to reveal the nasty grind mark upon the rough, hairy skin that it had landed against. The massive man whistled. Oh shit kid, that was pretty impressive. I felt that one to the bone. Surtur exclaimed with a hearty laugh and grin. The orange-haired man whipped out the arm he used to block with and flexed, staring at the wound that marked his bicep. quite the impressive technique, young master. I felt the grinding of the energy against my skin even before it popped. And the religion was pretty sick too. That you special technique or something?
Yeah, something like that. Naruto wiped his forehead of sweat. Hey, can we maybe move this spar to somewhere a little less heated? Oh what, a little sparring with me already got you tired.
Okay, first off there's nothing little about this spar. Naruto gestured to the numerous holes and landfills their training had left in the landscape, and second, I was being literal. He then pointed to the numerous trees and foliage currently being used as kindle for the wildfire Surtur had released while they fought. Maybe you could use just a little more control when shooting those flames. Never could before, shouldn't bother now. That's not a healthy way of looking at power like this. Naruto threw his arms up in exasperation. You're a walking volcano, and you burn up everything around you without even trying.
Aw shucks, you're too kind. That wasn't meant to be a compliment.
Surtur let out one last booming laugh that shook the ground before he started sprinting forward. Naruto raised his guard at the giant figure barreling towards him and dove out of the way at the last second. But the moment he avoided the mutated rook's path, Surtur slammed his foot into the ground and uprooted an entire section of the forest.
Naruto focused his chakra into his soles and kept straight even as the chunk of rock he stood on flipped into the air and stood perpendicular to the ground.
Surtur leapt up and charged up the rocky surface, his footsteps cracking the ground as he threw his hand out to grab Naruto's head. The whiskered blonde leapt off the rock and over Surtur's meaty hand to fall through the air. His wings sprouted from his back and stopped his fall down as he turned around and looked at the slab of rock that suddenly exploded in a rain of rubble and stone. Up here, kiddo. The large rook was dropping down towards Naruto's head, leaping off the rock slab with enough force to decimate it and correcting himself with his wings before pulling them back and falling towards the blonde. Naruto clicked his teeth and started forming a blue orb as Surtur smirked and coated his hands in flames. The jutsu and fire-clad punch collided and created a powerful rush of air in the resulting blast. Surtur went rocketing up through the sky and Naruto was sent barreling towards the ground. The blonde straightened his wings moments before he could hit the ground hard and glided over it before he rolled over the dirt to a stop. He hissed a few curses and couldn't decide whether to marvel or cower at the sheer ferocity this crazy man had. The young ninja lifted himself up and dusted off his clothes before looking up to the sky. He spotted his sparring partner's form falling back through the sky. The moment he landed, he'd probably start waving around the ridiculous strength again and Naruto would be forced to evade. And if he brought out his flames then things would just get harder.
Surtur came diving back towards the ground as Naruto lowered his body and took a sprinting position. The moment the large rook landed and cratered the ground was the moment Naruto launched himself across the clearing.
The blonde blur flew over the ground and when Surtur spotted it coming his way he slammed his hand down to squash it. But Naruto grabbed the ground just short of being made into a pancake, losing all of his momentum and tearing out a large piece of rock that he then used to break against Surtur's head. The rook took it in stride and reached for the young blonde only to grasp at thin air as Naruto avoided his reach once again.
Naruto flipped over the large man's head and landed behind him in a crouch, a Rasengan already formed in his hand.
He slammed the jutsu into the back of Surtur's leg and unlike the thick bicep he attacked before, this time the results were immediate. Surtur let out a groan of pain as he dropped to one knee when his leg was nearly blown out from under him. He swung his arms out wildly to try and catch the speedy blonde but Naruto flipped over his clothesline and avoided his wrath. The moment Naruto landed in front of the Norse clone he chambered his fist and swung up into Surtur's chin for an uppercut. The large rook leaned his head back and narrowly avoided the attack from connecting.
Naruto smirked as his sturdy opponent let out a surprised yelp when the strike to his chin came anyway and knocked him flat on his back. Natural energy manipulation at its finest.
Ha 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 ha. Surtur chortled and pounded his stomach with exuberant joy before he lifted himself up and ran a hand through his spiky hair. I think someone told me you could still hit people even if your attack misses. I wasn't really paying attention so I sorta missed the whole thing.
I manipulate the natural energy around me so when I throw a punch, even if I miss the target, I can still hit them. Naruto scratched his head with a quizzical look. Usually that was enough to knock down most people back where I come from but the people I use it against here are made of some really sturdy stuff. Cool stuff. Surtur rubbed his neck, and there ain't no way to block it?
Not that I know of. Though that bastard Azazel figured out a way to combat against it, and more assholes are figuring out each time. His memories went back to the unpleasant sight of a sickeningly pale fallen angel and a smug heavenly dragon he'd like nothing more than to bitch slap across the sky.
Well then that's something you need to look out for. Surtur warned with a challenging smirk. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Surtur sprinted forward and Naruto raised his guard. He waited to sense the Rook's oncoming attack but felt no movement at all, the massive clone only seeming to be charging his opponent. The blonde stayed wary and weighed his options before throwing out a punch.
With a loud echo the fist buried itself into Surtur's cheek and reverberated through his whole body. For a moment it was completely silent except for the faint sound of flames flickering around them.
Ha! Surtur suddenly yelled and a flood of flames ejected from his body in every direction. They filled the area instantly and reduced the ground and trees around the Rook to ash. The ginger stood back up tall and looked where the clone he had fought had popped from the intense wave of fire. He smirked, "Kid's gotta wish his clones were as sturdy as me."
The Norse fire giant flinched when he smiled and rubbed his cheek softly. In the middle of the field and forest reduced to flames and smoldering ash, the Rook slipped his finger into his mouth. When he pulled it out he saw it covered in blood. Ho ho, Heim picked a good one, devil. Oh what the hell? Naruto lowered his hands and frowned. That crazy big dude just barbecued me like fat meat. The young blonde scowled before tentatively looking to the side. Sir, can I? Did I say you could stop? Sorry? The young pawn immediately placed his hands together and concentrated to create a small ball of fire between his hands.
He focused his demonic power and made sure to gradually oscillate the size of the orb as best he could. Slowly and still making sure he was doing his practice he looked up at his supervisor. So, like I was trying to say sir, the clone fighting off Sears's Rook just got roasted like a whiskered marshmallow. Can I summon another one so he can keep fighting?
Are you still facing the other members of the training session? Yes. Then don't bother. If it popped then you know there was something about that fight you were unprepared for. Put your focus back on learning to better control your demonic power. Developing a skill you have yet to master instead of simply learning to punch someone else in ways you already fight seems like a much better use of your time. Yeah, but, Ijuka-san, we've been doing that for days. The dozen identical Naruto clones cried out in anguish to the strict Mao who simply stared over them sternly. Each clone had an orb in their hands made from a different element. Fire, water, wind, lightning, and earth. When Naruto started this practice of using his demonic power and Rias asked what he could most easily visualize, the first thing to come to mind were the 5 elements.
Since then he had been practicing with his new power and trying to create not just a ball of wind but a concentrated version of each element. His ability had truly jumped considerably since he started training like this, but, we create all these clones and we've been doing this non-stop. If we don't get a break then the original is probably gonna pass out from the strain. Growing in ability comes at a cost. Ijuka coldly responded as he walked by each clone and inspected their power closely. I'm sure you were already well aware of that fact. Ever since he found out that the evil piece inside his body was an old prototype Ijuka made, the Mao had been closely monitoring his progress and development. He supposed that he should be honored that someone of such high rank like Rias' brother was so interested in him, but he couldn't find it in himself for how much of a cold slave driver this monster of a man could be. Honestly, he really shouldn't be complaining. He wanted to get out here and train, so that's what he got. He is steadily gaining more power and should be able to face most of the challenges better from now on. So what if whenever his clones disappeared the main body got a headache? And who cared that his muscles were screaming in agony from all the sparring and fighting he was doing with these super powerful fighters? And sure, he might not be sleeping comfortably in a bed, but he came here to train. Not to cuddle up with Rias and enjoy the feeling of her warmth against his body and feeling that sense of relief when she smiled at him and maybe finally experience one of those idyllic summers regular teenagers and that idiot Issei dream of daily. He came to train, damn it. Are you all crying? All the Naruto clones had tears forming in their eyes and sniffled before one built up the strength to speak. Well, we're all the same guy, so I'm sure we're lamenting about the same thing right now. Yep. Totally.
I think I'm gonna pop if I have to hold it in any longer. Okay, maybe not all of us. I certainly hope he isn't thinking about the same thing. Is this a normal occurrence between clones? Ijuka questioned curiously with a tilt of his head. Do you share a hive mind away from the prime body? What? One clone shook his head. No, but we're the same guys, so of course it's gonna be similar thoughts.
So real-time events aren't shared between all you, but when one of you dispels, then your memories return to the original body. Which means that even if you are separated, then there is still a connection lingering between you that connects the main body to the cloned ones. Still a fascinating technique even after I've had all this time to examine it. Would you like some more time to examine it then? Naruto inquired, a hint of hope in his voice at the chance he might have found for a breather. If you'd like, we could stop and use some techniques and let you better understand how we. No need. I already figured it out. Ijuka interrupted, you use this technique rather frequently. Even if I wasn't focusing on it, with how much I've seen it, I've already figured out how it works. The molding of your energy to create a new body identical to yours that returns information immediately upon destruction. The green-haired devil waved his hand with a bored acceptance. I've already figured out how to dispel it anyway.
Why you have? Yes, with a wave of my hand. Ijuka lifted his hand as it flowed with intricate magic circles. Behold. No, that's okay, you don't, devil. You alright, Naruto-kun? Fine. Naruto said with a weary shake of his head. Ijuka-san just popped all the clones he had with him to show me he could. Sounds like something he'd do. Sirzex nodded, understanding his oldest friend's action. He's quite eccentric like that. Very hard to get a handle on his train of thought.
Well, ain't you two the cutest pot and kettle set imaginable?
Sirzex chuckled lightly before shifting his body to face Naruto in a sideways stance. The older redhead smiled confidently and beckoned for him to come. Naruto sneered but remained in his crouched position as he looked around and inspected the ground around him.
There were trenches and craters and all sorts of damage marring the rocky area they had ended up fighting in. He looked back at the wooded landscape they had already fought through and the sheer destruction from their path. Several trees were broken and toppled over while a few had clear and clean holes in them like they had been drilled through. And of course somewhere in the thicket of trees, McGregor continued to creepily work on his projects while they trained. Naruto narrowed his eyes and lifted his hand to his side. He imagined light running down the veins of his arm before reaching his palm. He felt a powerful warmth settle in his hand as it started to flicker in his grasp.
Oh, you're able to make one much faster than you could before. Sirzex remarked. I guess Ijuka's focused mindset really did you some wonders, huh? Yeah, keep talking. Naruto's other hand came over the fire and constricted it into a ball before lifting his hand up.
The fireball followed his lifted hand while several more balls of fire created from his demonic power followed its path. Between Naruto's hands were several balls of concentrated flames that floated before him for a moment before he threw his hands forward and launched them out. The balls of fire flew, but instead of hitting Sirzex they pelted the ground in front of him and blinded the Mao in dust. With several of his other clones destroyed in their fights that let Naruto summon two more to his side to help him fight. They leapt through the air and pounced on the cloud of dust to attack their foe while he was blind. Naruto clicked his teeth as memories quickly flooded his head with their destruction. Several small spheres came flying out of the cloud of dust and made holes when they did. They circled around the entire cloud and erased any particles that were in its way in moments. The cloud of dust was vaporized and revealed a nonplussed Sirzex in its center. The three orbs of red and black hovered by his side as Sirzex smiled cheekily. I'm glad you weren't brazenly jumping into the fight without any thought.
Yeah, already tried that. Naruto threw his thumb over his shoulder and towards the destruction behind them. Didn't work out so well. Learning from your battles. You'd be surprised how many people still have to figure stuff like that out even at my age. Well, considering the people I'm fighting and the state I'm in, it would be in my best interest. Naruto remarked as he held out his palm again and converted his demonic power to rock. With a yell he slammed his palm into the ground and with a mighty crack watched as a split formed in the earth by his feet. Of course that doesn't mean I still can't play bigger too. He forced his fingers into the cracks and with the strength bolstered by his sage mode he flipped several massive chunks out of the rocky landscape. The slabs of rock were lifted up into the air and fell over on top of Sirzex.
The Lucifer narrowed his eyes and sent his ruin of destruction orbs out to defend himself. The orbs of demonic power barreled through the slabs of rock, falling down on top of him. The orbs flew through and then returned through the chunk of rock several times until it broke apart into several large piles of rubble. It rained down rocks and debris around the quiet redhead as he stood while the dust settled.
Naruto leapt over a rock and came down at Searsex with a Rasengan in hand. He buried it into the spot Searsex had stood a moment earlier, the mouse sidestepping the oncoming danger that cratered the ground with a splintering web. Naruto clicked his teeth and glared at the retreating crimson-haired devil before chasing after him.
Searsex kept a comfortable space between them and avoided being in Naruto's reach. He flicked his hand out as the black orbs went flying away from his side and flew for the whiskered blonde. Naruto cartwheeled away as the black orbs barreled through the boulder that had been behind him and left distinct fissures in its wake. The blonde slid over the ground and looked up to see the orbs training back on him. He gathered his demonic power in his hand again, and with his next dodge he whipped his arm out and tossed another orb at Searsex. The redhead Mal leapt aside and avoided the fiery explosion coming his way. He grew his wings and flew up as an orb of water and wind exploded against each other. Get back here! Naruto charged after Searsex while screaming at the top of his lungs. He weaved side to side as two black orbs came flying for his head and flew straight into the ground when he dodged. His hand reached behind him and yanked out his fighting knife as he jumped through the air and flew at Searsex. The redhead lurched back as Naruto thrusted his knife for his body. A ruin of destruction came flying up from the ground right through the knife, disintegrating the blade and leaving only the handle in the younger man's grasp.
Oh come on, Naruto lamented as he dropped back to the ground and stared at the ruined knife in disbelief. I paid 4 yen, for this thing. Damn it all. No need to be so upset, Searsex said as he lowered himself to the ground and stood beside the downtrodden blonde. He retracted his wings and patted his back. The loss of a knife is not enough to be so depressed about.
Says you. I don't have money to burn. Plus I haven't exactly been putting in the extra hours at the ramen shop and Gramps is just barely letting me hang on by a thread. Naruto waved the broken weapon around aimlessly before letting it drop from his hand. Son of a bitch. Well, in fairness, I'm not sure how much damage a 4,000 yen knife would have done against your future enemies. He tried to alleviate the pain, but Naruto still looked miffed by the loss of his weapon. Searsex sighed and scratched his cheek. But if it's really bothering you so much, McGregor, he called out, if you have some spare time later, I have a project for you.
Is it fun? Probably. Happily then. Searsex nodded and looked down at Naruto. There, all cleared up. Now should we call it a match? Huh? Naruto tilted his head before standing up. Oh, this wasn't the end of the match. The blonde stood across from the redhead and smirked. It's a distraction.
Searsex heard something cutting through the air and looked back to see a Rasenshuriken being thrown his way. Another Naruto stood far away at the edge of the clearing and popped the moment he threw the attack. Searsex felt the presence behind him vanish as Naruto leapt away from his side to avoid the blast. The crimson-haired devil smiled. Well, if you want to try it again. His hand snapped out and a ruin of destruction formed in his palm before flying towards the oncoming jutsu. The black and red orb slammed into the larger white and blue one and breached its center. The jutsu exploded in a deafening burst of sound and air. Searsex protected his eyes and the force of air caused his hair to whip like crazy behind him. After a few seconds, the premature blast finally came to an end and revealed the gargantuan crater created in its wake. Searsex dusted himself off and looked over at the whiskered teen that slowly emerged back into the battlefield. The orange coloring that covered Naruto's eyes and the strange change to his eyes had disappeared with the last of his energy expelled in the attack. The blonde wiped the sweat off his cheek as he stood across from the redhead and asked, will Rias be able to do that too? Because right now if we crossed attacks, I doubt her destruction would be able to hold out against my attack. Well, I have had a few centuries of experience over her. The Lucifer answered with a fond smile, but that doesn't mean she won't one day hold power that could match or even surpass my own. You'll have your hands full in the years to come. Searsex commented with a chuckle before tilting his head, so now what? What comes next?
What do you mean? This is another distraction, isn't it? Because your eyes, they haven't given up yet. There was a cacophony of popping and explosions as everything around them erupted in a cloud of white smoke. Sears let the smoke wash over him before he realized that the battlefield had changed considerably. Surrounded by a horde of blonde, whiskered young devils in tattered clothes.
Ah yes, while his senjutsu granted him great boosts in his stats, it robbed him of creating a multitude of clones like this. And with his form vanishing with the use of that last big attack, he created all these clones in the confusion and made them change into rocks. And then slipped them in all around to match the remains and rubble that peppered the field.
He knew he'd destroy the Rasen Shuriken again, and prepared for it by laying in ambush.
As Sears X was swarmed on all sides by the mob of clones, he smirked to himself. He was proud to know his future brother-in-law could play bigger and smarter than most others his age. Unfortunately, Sears X just played better. The clone inches away from hitting him popped when two of his black orbs came flying up through the ground. The entire horde of Narutos stopped in their tracks in surprise, not realizing that the technique from earlier hadn't dissipated but simply waited in the ground for its time to shine. They tried to slip in an attack but it was too late. The balls circled Sears X and quickly started to expand their perimeter outwards. The orbs of destruction made quick work of the mass group of clones and destroyed them in seconds. The clones tried to create their elemental orbs to attack again but a ruin of destruction would fly in through their head before continuing in the sweep.
I've had fun, but I'll ask again. Sears walked forward and through the cloud of white smoke before emerging from the other side with a curious grin. Shall we call it a match?
Really pissing me off right now. Naruto muttered from his spot on the ground, seated in his meditation pose to gather more power but stopped by the orbs of destruction on either side of his head. How did you know I would pull that move? Because despite what you might think, I've been desperate and overwhelmed in fights before too. I know a few last-ditch opportunities when I see them. I wasn't desperate. Well, Sears X gave a hearty laugh and dispelled his attacks before offering the younger devil his hand. Naruto seemed reluctant but quickly accepted and was pulled to his feet. The former Grimoire wished to strike a conversation with his young friend but noticed a magic circle on his hand indicating a call coming through. He held out his hand and a hologram of Graphia was formed. Graphia, what's the matter?
I am simply providing you with an update, Sears Sama. The maid responded in her respectful tone. Rias-sama wished to inform you that there were no dire problems and she should make a full recovery with some rest. Oh good, I'm glad to hear that. Sears sounded relieved but when he looked up and saw the look of confusion and concern on Naruto's face, he fretted. He tried to disarm him with a smile. I forgot I needed to tell you something, he. Naruto's eyebrow twitched violently. Hey, you might just win now. Devil, Kaneko woke up with a faint stir and shuffled the covers off her with some effort.
She let out a tiny whine and flinched from the ache in her body but forced it down. The little rook pulled herself out of bed and sat at its edge before looking up and around the room. She spotted her reflection in the mirror and realized it wasn't just her body that felt tired. Her eyes had bags and there was some sweat on her brow that caused her hair to stick to her skin. If she had the energy she'd try to clean herself up but she honestly couldn't be bothered. The freshman carefully stood out of her bed and slowly took steps forward as her bare feet ran through the carpet of the room. The large shirt she wore was hanging off her tiny form and Kaneko couldn't spot any other clothes put out for her to change into. Although if Akeno was still here she'd tell her that she needed to rest now and not try to change.
Akeno must have left to take a break after looking after her for so long.
Apparently Yuto, Zenobia, and Gasper had come to visit her while she had been resting, and Asia had come to give her some basic healing. Unfortunately her problem stemmed from exhaustion, and Asia could only heal physical wounds. It felt odd for the freshman to try and console the saddened nun for her inability to help. Bucho had been a constant present through the day, and Issei had come to visit as well to see how she was doing. The naked concern in their eyes and the urgency in which they came to see her made a flutter fill her belly. And it did well to ease her mind if only a little. Kaneko pulled the balcony doors open and stepped out to the perch to look out over the Grimoire estate. It was already night, obvious from the change in the sky that now was filled with different colors and stars. It always mesmerized her just how beautiful it could look so late. Kaneko felt so relaxed that she didn't realize until then that her ears and tail had unfolded from her body. Oh. Kaneko's eyes widened in shock and she turned to see Naruto seated on the edge of the balcony.
The disheveled blonde looked surprised by the sudden appearance of her extra appendages as he awkwardly waved. Hey, Sleeping Beauty.
Kaneko immediately darted into the room and slammed the doors shut behind her as her face started to heat up. She rubbed her cheeks and froze when she heard the doors open and close again behind her. The white-haired girl lowered her head, her heartbeat filling her ears as fear caused her limbs to shake. With a deep breath she shuffled around, gripping the edge of her shirt tightly as she looked up at the tall blonde.
I didn't know you had those. I wasn't a human before Bucko reincarnated me. Kaneko muttered softly. I was a nekosho. A special type of nekomata, Yukai. Guess they aren't just for decoration. Naruto took a step forward but stopped when he saw Kaneko flinch at his approach. He kept his distance but knelt down so he could look up into her eyes. What happened?
I just pushed myself a little too far. The young teen sounded guilty as she said that and lifted her eyes to look into Naruto's. She still looked ashamed for whatever reason but kept her gaze on him while she spoke. I was trying to get stronger but no matter how hard I push myself there isn't a change. Except when I.
Kaneko's voice went silent but the ears on her head twitched and the tail sprouting from her back swayed. You're stronger when you're like this. Naruto finished her sentence, earning a small nod from the younger girl. The blonde shrugged. If you're stronger like this, then why don't you use it?
Kaneko didn't give him an answer, but instead extended her hand towards him. He stared at the offered hand for a moment before looking up to see the timid expression on her face. Carefully Naruto settled his hand in hers, her small hand resting in his palm before it curled up. He felt a strange sensation wash over him as he held her hand. One he was extremely familiar with, but not one he was expecting. He felt the same feeling of his eyes changing when he gathered natural energy, but then felt the natural energy be drained from him and his eyes return to normal. The exhaustion and fatigue he had carried with him hadn't disappeared, but had lessened with her trick. He looked at his young friend in surprise as she pulled back her hand and rested it against her side. I'm a sage too. Nekomata can manipulate natural energy and we can channel Tuki and utilize Yujutsu and become stronger and heal people. I knew what your power was the moment you used it in the raiding game, and that's why I was scared of you after it. Kaneko muttered shamefully as her eyes started to water. Do you remember when we talked about Senjutsu, and the adverse effects it can have on people?
Madness. I wasn't talking about it as just any warning. I have seen it for myself. Kaneko stuttered as she started to shake from fear.
She looked up and saw Naruto motion for the bed, Kaneko nodding in agreement and sitting on the edge of it before her legs gave out remembering the traumatic memory. I can't really remember my mother and father, but I still see every moment I had with my sister as clear as day. For as long as I can remember she raised and watched over me my entire life. Wherever we went, however cold or hungry we might have been, at least we were together. But if we hadn't found some place to finally settle down, we would have ended up dead. So we met a devil who saw the potential of our strength and how it could grow. He offered my sister a position in his peerage, and in return we would finally have a place to call home. She took it, and we were finally safe. My sister grew stronger and didn't have to constantly watch over me, and the devil who took us in was kind and sweet. Things finally seemed alright.
Naruto noticed the tear running down her cheek as she took a shallow breath. She trained so much that her skill in Senjutsu became second nature, but so did its drawbacks.
When I walked in I saw him in pieces and she was bathed in his blood. She was branded as a stray devil, and she was just gone. And I was left alone, with everyone seeing me as a monster to be punished for what happened. Tears started to stream down her red cheeks as Kaneko sobbed. I never wanted to use this form again after that. I didn't want to lose myself or remember everything that happened. But I can't get stronger without it. I don't know what to do. A
hand settled over the ones resting in her lap and caused Kaneko to gasp. She looked up and saw Naruto had knelt down in front of her with a soft smile on his face. Kaneko. You said you can heal people, right? Why yes. It was you, wasn't it? You were the one who healed me and gave me back my chakra. Kaneko hiccuped and hid her face. You said you don't like this form, so why did you do that?
Because of what you said. And that we were worth risking your life for. How could I not do what I could to help you when you would go so far for us? For me. Kaneko cried as her puffy red eyes closed. I was scared and terrified beyond all belief, but I just wanted to try and help you. I know this power can help us, and I know if I tried I could use it. But if I lost control, if I did the same thing to Bucho or any of you like what Oni-sama did. You wouldn't. But just thinking about it makes me sick. Imagining my hands covered in blood, or even the moment when you all would have to fight me off or put me down is. Kaneko. Naruto's hand grasped Kaneko's tightly as she looked into his eyes. You can use that power or not, that's your choice. You will get stronger, and we will help you do that. But don't be ashamed of yourself. Don't hate who you are. But what if I'm a monster? I find that hard to believe. Kaneko looked up at him and saw the smile on his face. No matter what happens, I can't see you being anything else but the cool little devil we all know and love. The girl who loves her friends and family enough to put their well-being over her own. You realize that, right? Kaneko's tears continued to fall and she whimpered before lowering her head. She felt her body being pulled into Naruto's for a gentle hug as his hand gentle stroked her hair. Her quiet sobs were muffled by his chest as he whispered into her ear that it would be okay.
Memories of a similar state where her sister calmed her down came to mind, and the tears fell even harder.
Devil. Naruto closed the door behind him after putting Kaneko to sleep. The little Nekomata had tired herself out from her crying and Naruto tucked her in before stepping outside. Sounded like you took a lot out of her. He looked to the side and saw Akeno standing by the wall with a tray of tea that had gone cold while she waited. The blonde faced her. She's probably gonna be asleep for a little longer.
That's a good thing. Poor girl needed her rest. The ponytailed queen agreed before eyeing him suspiciously. But I'm not sure how I feel about an older man in a state of undress sneaking into Kaneko-chan's room while she was in that state. Can't help what I'm wearing, I came here right from my training. Naruto complained, if you want someone to blame, try Ria's crazy brother and his team of unrelenting monsters.
You don't have to make excuses with me. Come running along in any state of undress that you like. Just expect some kind of reaction when you do. Akeno said as she walked past him and for the door, but if you are coming by here, maybe stop in and check with Bucho. You know how she worries when you disappear.
Wait. Naruto called out before Akeno could slip through the door and disappear. The violet-eyed girl looked towards him as the whiskered teen stared back. Why have you always been so wary about me? That's a bit forward to just be asking me. Well, I've been trying to figure it out and I haven't gotten anywhere, so here I am, using the direct approach. Did you ever consider it might have been when you barged into the girls' locker room and manhandled my bra?
I could understand if that made you angry, but not why it would make you so cautious.
Akeno let out a small laugh. You're right. Honestly, I just forget about it because it doesn't matter anymore. But what does matter was when I first saw you. Naruto raised his eyebrow as Akeno laid down her tray and turned to face him directly. I remember your first day at our school, when you introduced yourself.
Everyone in the room started to pass rumors and fallacies and everything imaginable to try and piece you together somehow. But I could see something in your eyes when you introduced yourself, just a total resignation from everything around you. That there was nothing you could do or anything someone could say that would change your mind.
How would you? And then Rias saved your life and made you a part of the peerage. I was hesitant around you because despite how hard I knew she would try, I really didn't believe that she could bring that light you needed back into your eyes. But lo and behold, she did it, and your spark reignited. And in the process I found out you were a man to recklessly jump into the most dangerous situations with little regard for your life.
Akeno's tone grew harsher as her eyes narrowed. I can completely understand the desire to protect the people you love.
I would do whatever I could for them as well, but never die.
Because if I gave my life for them, then they won't be able to honor my sacrifice, only live with the pain of me being gone and the gap that leaves in them. Because that's the truth about sacrifices like that, you don't protect them so they can see the next day, you leave them with a hole in their heart, and now that Rias has fallen for you, actions like running into battles you can't fight anymore or disappearing off somewhere hurt her more than ever. Despite the energy in Akeno's tone, Naruto never once looked away in shame or guilt. He only stared in silence as the energy in her violet eyes disappeared and she collected herself. After a moment of silence between the two, Naruto finally spoke in a quiet tone. People can't say something like that without experience. Akino took a deep breath and fixed her hair out of her eye. She turned back around and bent down to pick up her tray. I think more than anyone else in our peerage, I can empathize with Kaneko-chan the most. Being left behind. Being afraid of what you really are. How awful and suffocating it can feel. I've been where she is, and it is hell. Once upon a time Naruto believed there was nothing worse in this world than having no one to call your own. But as he grew up he realized there was a pain even worse than loneliness.
Loss. One he had only recently been alleviated of thanks to the orc and Kurama's return, but most people weren't so fortunate.
I'd ask why you don't like me either, but it probably stems from a number of reasons. I'm sure everything I just said is just another reason on a list. Akino smiled beautifully and stepped inside the room as she left. Goodbye, Naruto-san. If your training ends up causing you serious pain, be sure to spare no detail.
The door closed behind her as Naruto sighed and turned around. There was a reason he didn't trust Akino, but it really wasn't anything complicated or hard to understand. How could he trust someone who faked their smiles so easily?
Devil. Naruto felt a hand grip his shoulder and jostle him awake from his drowsy stupor. He moaned and sunk further into the pillow his arms provided him. No, go away. Need sleep.
Naruto, now is not the time to be taking power naps. Rias warned while nudging him a little harder. Those psychos can wait for training. I need to rest a little longer. You're not training. We're at a gala and you're snoring.
Naruto's eyes creeped open and he lifted his head to see he was seated at a table at the edge of a large ballroom. There were many distinguished-looking men and women of every size walking around the room, and some spared looks his way at his uncouth behavior. Of course most others were more focused on speaking with each other. Naruto sat back in his chair and looked down at the suit he was wearing. I don't even remember putting this on.
Oni-sama and Ijuka-sama must have really put you through the ringer. Rias drew a chair to sit by his side and placed her hand on his lap as he yawned. Will you be alright with staying at this party? Just need to fill my gut and walk around a bit. I'll be fine. Alright. Rias softly said before her eyes traveled over him and laughed. My. You clean up very nicely. What do you think about me? Do I even need to say it? Feels like you already knew the answer. Naruto opened his eye and saw Rias giving him a subtle pout. The childish response was really the only thing about her that could even be remotely considered as childish. Her lips had been glossed with lipstick and her cheeks blushed with makeup, with her long red hair tied up behind her head in a bun. And her gorgeous figure was displayed with the dark red dress that hugged her form. He didn't want to look because then he would just be staring, but he pulled his eyes away long enough to mutter, "You look fine." Oh. Rias playfully stretched her word, no doubt noticing the slight color change in his cheeks when he looked. That seemed to be enough as she touched his arm. There are a few people I need to talk to, so please make sure not to fall asleep again, okay? He hummed and watched her walk off to engage in conversation with others. After a moment Naruto pushed himself up and started walking around the ballroom with the catering and drinks in mind. While he walked he looked around the room and spotted some particular figures that drew his eye. There was Gasper, wearing a little dress of his own because of course he would. Issei and Asia appeared to be having a discussion with the little sister of the Phoenix guy they fought a few months back. And the Maos were all gathered together speaking with Azazel, a taller man standing by his back, and the oddest duo he had ever seen. Oden-sama, you can't say something so inappropriate to Leviathan-sama. What? All I said is that she's filled in nicely, it's a compliment. It's rude. I really don't mind. Can't hide the truth of it. Levi-chan has got it going on. But, see, you're the only one forcing your conceptions of etiquette on us. This is why no one wants to go out with you. Why did you have to bring that up? Naruto tried to drown out the whimpering and consoling from the other adults as he spotted the buffet. He grabbed himself a glass of champagne and stated digging in. Naruto, there you are. Zenobia walked up to him and folded her arms under her chest as she joined his side. I haven't seen you at all since coming back. Hey Zenobia. You're looking nice. He motioned to the blue dress she wore and then offered her a glass of the same thing he was drinking. I was busy training with Rias' brother this whole time. You trained with a Mao? The former church warrior questioned in surprise. That must have been quite the experience. That's a more than generous way of looking at it. Naruto commented with a hearty gulp of his drink.
He looked to the blue-haired woman. What about you? How was your training? Lucrative. Azazel permitted me to a training center at the Grigori headquarters so I could push myself. It was very trying, but I was able to sharpen my skills even more, which is always welcome. The green streak in her hair swayed as the knight looked around. What time I didn't spend training, I explored more of the underworld. And what did you think? I think it's beautiful. Zenobia softly admitted while looking down at her glass and swirling its contents. The people here are considerate and the landscape is so peaceful and beautiful. I always expected the worst of this realm because of the stories, but in truth it is such a wonderful place. Naruto smiled as he took another sip. Glad to hear.
I also masturbated for the first time, which was a lot of fun. Many eyes traveled their way at the sudden spray that left Naruto's mouth and the horrid gagging that followed as he gasped for air.
I had always avoided it when I was a human, but since I'm a devil it's part and parcel to delve into worldly desires, as I'm sure you remember. Zenobia continued with an excited look on her face. It was such an experience, and some people at the Grigori Institute were surprised it was my first time. Most of the males said that an experience with them would have been more fulfilling, but many of the females laughed at that. In fact, some took me aside and propositioned. Zenobia. Naruto placed his hands on her shoulders and looked her in the eyes, doing his best to look commanding despite the dribble and redness in his eyes. Don't tell anyone what you just told me. Ever. At all.
Why not? Because we keep things like that secret. Just to ourselves. Hush hush, okay. Is that what you do when you masturbate? Don't say that. Naruto bit his lip. Yep, that's what I do.
Ah, I understand. She nodded and downed her drink in one go. With a sharp gasp she put her glass down and nodded. I'm going to mingle a little bit more. I'll talk with you later, okay?
Please let their next conversation be easier on his heart. The blonde took a deep breath and looked around the room. He saw the members of the orc spaced out around the room talking with many other people. They all looked to be having fun.
But someone was missing. Devil. Walking through the darkness of the forest in the night was unsettling. The animals chirping and squeaking as they ran. Kaneko had traded out the fancy dress Rias and Akino had spent so long picking out for her to instead change into her school uniform. The outfit she didn't mind getting ripped up or damaged.
It was for a split second while she looked out the window. In a room filled with people of unimaginable power and skill, she sensed something far away she hadn't felt in ages. Something that drew her outside and away from everyone else. She really wished she had just imagined it. Just her memories and feelings resurfacing after the recent trouble she had.
Ah, you noticed. That was sweet of you. Kaneko looked up and felt a strange feeling grip her heart. Fear. Anxiety. Relief. Disbelief. Hesitation.
Nostalgia. Oni-sama. Hey Sharon. You got bigger, NYA. Omake. Culture shock, superheroes. I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative. The TV screen went black and the lights flicked back on over the room. The orc members stood out of their seats as Issei stretched his arms. Man, I forgot how fun that first one was. How did you like it, Asia?
I thought it was amazing, Issei-san. The blonde nun said with excitement in her voice after witnessing the feature for the first time. I thought the struggle Iron Man-san went through after his ordeal was inspiring. And his friendship with his secretary friend was so sweet and heartwarming. I liked the fighting and power that suit had. Zenobia added with a sparkle in her eye. I never knew science could create something so powerful and amazing as a full-powered armored suit. Science is certainly not an aspect we should overlook.
Hee, we might be a few years off from reaching suits like that.
That was so much fun. Zenobia said again as Asia nodded enthusiastically beside her. I heard about these movies but I never bothered to see them while I was working for the church. I was missing out. When I see Irina again I should get her to watch them with me. That would be fun. I'm sure it would be good for our dynamic we had movie nights like this every now and then. Rias offered. Her peerage was quick to nod and agree with the idea of a movie night with everyone. The redhead smiled and looked down at the boy seated beside her. And what did you think?
Naruto? Huh? The whiskered blonde blinked and came back to reality after staring at the television in complete silence. When he saw the amused smile Rias was showing him, he coughed and sat up in his chair. Yeah, it was good. Nice film.
Is that all? Well, what else is there to say? How about all your jittery movements or gasps of shock or cheers when something good happened? Akino offered with a coy laugh, you'd almost think you've never seen a movie.
I like movies, so what? But no movie back where I came from looked like that.
Well, I guess our movies have a few things ninjas can't so easily replicate.
Tell me about it. And that armored guy has books and shows and action figures? Rias giggled at the clear excitement Naruto was trying to hide. Yes, he does. We have quite a lot of superheroes like that who are very popular around the world. Remember that movie starring Batman I showed you? The one with the gadgets, right? Oh, he was so cool. The blonde grinned and smiled at the menu for the movie showing the superhero. And people in this world watch these guys all the time? These are the heroes everyone looks up to? Yep. A lot of people are inspired by what they do and what they overcome. That's why there are so many outlets for us to see them though. Yes, senpai, they're all really cool. I need to show you a guy called Spider-Man. I bet you'd like him. The door to the club room opened up and Azazel walked in. Oh, what's going on here? What are you all doing this late? Watching movies. Hey Azazel, Naruto sat up. Did you know about these superheroes? They're freaking awesome. Of course I know. I haven't been living under a rock or coming from a different dimension like some folks. They're pretty common knowledge in this world.
Unfortunately, heroes and characters like this aren't so widely known in the underworld. Rias said as she ejected the disc to add back into the collection. Most forms of entertainment come more from old stories and legends. The devils don't have original heroes like that. Then we should bring them over. Let the children of the underworld have some superheroes of their own. While the novel idea was being passed around between the peerage, Azazel stood aside and stroked his chin. He stared at the young devils before a sly grin formed. Now that could be interesting. Devil. Done.